I'm super excited. I have been looking forward to this for a while. So thank everybody who is joining us. I don't know, I can't really see who's joining us or not because I'm doing this via Zoom and it's going through Facebook. So I have a separate device running over here, which is kind of telling me what's going on, but I still don't know who's in attendance just yet. But anyways, welcome everybody for participating in this event. Over the years, I have recognized how important it is to look at nutrition as part of substance use and recovery and getting better. And I've had many meetings with dietitians and nutritionists and hobbyists and coaches, and never once have I seen one that has addiction as part of their actual practice. So not so long ago, I was on social media and I saw the Addiction Nutritionist Kelly Miller here. And so immediately I messaged her and said, hey, can we collaborate? Can we do something? And here she is now. She's zooming in from Denver, Colorado with us today, a couple of time zones away from us. And she's going to share some nutrition addiction information with us. Thank you for coming, Kelly. Can you tell us just a little bit about, so welcome first and foremost, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and what it is, how about why you got into this? Why the passion with addiction and nutrition?
Sure. So I'm a nutritional therapist and recovery coach. The backstory, I guess, is kind of vast and wide, but I would say that addiction's always been a part of my life. As a youngster, it was family members, and then coming into the teen years and adult years, I had my own personal struggles. It started with food in my youth and then turned into nicotine addiction and then alcohol dependence. And it took decades to even realize that that there was a connection between what I was eating and the addictions that I was dealing with. It took decades to realize that food was kind of the gateway for me. I had always known that I had a problem with smoking because I was basically a chain smoker for 20 years. And no matter what I tried, I couldn't figure out how to quit. But it all kind of converged for me in my early 30s when I was diagnosed with chronic autoimmune disorder. And that's when I had to actually really start looking at what I was eating and the connection between that and my illness and inflammation. And so I sort of stumbled across the connection between food and addiction, because as I started to pick apart my food choices and my lifestyle choices, something happened in me that I had never expected and never saw coming. And it was a mood balancing that I had never experienced. I thought I was just an anxious person who suffered from depression. I had absolutely no idea that what I was eating and putting in my body had this unbelievable connection to the other addictions that I had. And so as I started picking away at those things, all these other things came into light. And as I started to realize the connection, I just sort of started to go on that search. And so the first thing that I did was get certified in amino acid therapy. Amino acids, and I'll just give you the headline, it's supplements that can really help balance neurotransmitters that affect things like depression and anxiety. And then I went back to school to become a nutritional therapist so that I could specialize in nutrition for addiction, because as I was researching it, it seemed like there were these few people who held all this knowledge that nobody else knew about. And that fascinated me. And it also frustrated me that it wasn't widely available. And so I was like, this is what I need to do with my life. This has had such a dramatic change for me. I need to make sure that I can talk to this about this topic with whoever will listen, because it could be so life-changing for other people as well.
I love it. I think it's amazing, because I think that when we're talking about people in substance use or talking about people in addiction, that there's a natural disconnect between my thoughts, my emotions, and my feelings and how my body acts. So we kind of walk around with this blinder on of trying not to look at how things make us feel. So when you look at, what I put in my body makes me feel, and I've become more aware of it myself the last while, is, at the end of the day, when I sit down, I go, I don't feel good. I start taking an inventory of what I put in my body, and I go, wow, I put some things in there that aren't really that helpful to to how I'm feeling, what I'm doing. But in the grand scheme of things, from an addiction standpoint, we look at it as biological, psychological, social, spiritual, all these constructs that we're trying to help heal people. But if you look at the modalities that the professionals use in the field right across the board, diet and sleep are like way down here, but they're actually they're the front line. They're right up at the top, and we don't really talk about them much, because if I'm not feeling good right now, I can't make changes that I want to make for tomorrow, right? So if I'm feeling horrible right now, I'm more likely to go into a direction that I don't want to go. So Kelly has created something, or participating with other people to create something called the PAUSE protocol. And for people that don't know what the PAUSE is PAUSE is post-acute withdrawal syndrome. So people can have these post-acute withdrawal symptoms of physical, mental, emotional, mental health concerns after stopping using drugs and alcohol that can last up to a couple of years. But very rarely do people look at it with nutrition. So I don't want to steal your thunder, Kelly, but first off, there's going to be a handout at the end. We're going to give you a link to a handout at the end for some of the nutrition tips and stuff for Kelly for this post-acute withdrawal protocol. But can you tell me what post-acute withdrawal protocol is?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought up the biopsychosocial model, because this absolutely falls under the biopsychosocial model. It falls under the bio piece. So when we talk about that model and we look at the biological aspects, we're really just using pharmaceuticals, for that category. And pharmaceuticals absolutely have their place, but nutrition therapy falls under that biological aspect as well. And so one of the things I found my frustration with is that PAUSE, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, is really kind of glossed over in the recovery industry. I feel like it's not talked about nearly enough. I have spoken to countless individuals who, when I even bring up the term, they're like, I don't know what that is. If you go on Amazon and you look for books about PAUSE, I think one comes up. And so my frustration with that is, if you're living through PAUSE, perfect. If you're living through it, it can be absolute hell. And it's just, we use that term as a way to describe a cluster of symptoms that individuals go through in that first, typically 1 to 2 years of recovery. And it's, it's anxiety, depression, lethargy, low libido, anhedonia, which is like joylessness or inability to feel pleasure. All of these really life impacting symptoms. And so I realized that we were only using pharmaceuticals to treat this and not a whole lot of other lifestyle changes. But when I started to research and go to school, and I found out about the immense connection between nutrition therapy and PAUSE, I realized this is where I'm going to focus my research. So the PAUSE, so if somebody has diabetes or heart disease or any other kind of chronic illness, and they go to their doctor and, they say, this is my diagnosis, oftentimes, even high blood pressure, oftentimes there's a dietary intervention for that chronic illness, like the DASH diet or something like that. But for people in recovery, there is no framework. There is no dietary intervention. And I was like, this is the missing piece. This is what I'm going to create. And so that's what the PAUSE protocol is. It is a dietary framework it's highly customizable to individuals, but the framework provides everything that somebody would need in terms of, where should they focus their eating choices, and some lifestyle factors that play into that as well to help manage blood sugar and things like that. And so the whole thing is designed to help people improve their mood, reduce their cravings, and prevent relapse. So that's what the dietary intervention is. And the handout that you guys will have access to later is this really great one-page handout you can put on your fridge that lists all the different categories of foods with multiple choices of foods within those categories, so that you just sort of have that handy handout to kind of reference when you're building your meals.
That's the way you put that, I just love it. When you go in any other chronic illness or anything that's, and then, disease or addiction, constituted as in the disease model, and looking at it from a mental health concern, all the rest of those chronic illnesses have something, a protocol that says, here, eat this, do that, but not addiction. It just doesn't register. It doesn't make sense. So what do you think is the most common when somebody comes and they have PAUSE? What is the most common thing that they're going to be looking for, searching for when they come to see you?
So typically, when we were talking about how there's no dietary intervention, what do people do when they want information? They Google, right? And so if somebody's in recovery and they take to their computer and they go, what's the best diet for somebody in recovery? Unfortunately, there's a massive amount of information out there, and a lot of it is not good because it's just somebody's personal experience. It's a blog post that someone might come across, or it's very, very basic, like just eat more fruits and vegetables, which everybody knows.
I typed some of my symptoms in there the other day, like how I was feeling, and it turns out I have menopause. So you've got to be careful. You got to be careful with what you go searching for.
Exactly. There's just so much confusion. So usually when somebody comes to me, they're saying like, hey, I've heard about pause. I think I'm having pause. I resonate with some of the symptoms that you've talked about. And when I Google, this is what I come up with. And I just don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Like, am I supposed to be doing a 7-day juice cleanse? Like, what am I supposed to be doing so that I can feel better? I can't sleep. I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety. I would say those are probably the two most common, is insomnia and anxiety. But depression plays a big role. Low libido plays a big role. I cannot tell you how many young men in their 20s are already on, taking testosterone because their testosterone levels have bottomed out at that very young age for many different reasons, but that's a very, very common issue for people in recovery, specifically men. And so usually they come to me with these just very basic needs, like I need more energy, I can't sleep, I'm just anxious and can't, I'm not grounded. Tell me what to do. That's really what it is. And so we get them started on a combination of customized supplements and a plan that works for them. So that, like I said, there's a framework, but we have to start from that framework and build it out so that it's, customized for individuals, because what works for one person is not always going to be the best fit for somebody else.
Okay. So, that leads me right into the next question. I have a couple of questions. Is this specific to drug of choice?
So that is something that does need to be taken into consideration, but the framework itself is going to be the same for everybody as a starting point, because no matter what you're, using, abusing, misusing, whatever terms you want to use, alcohol, cocaine, methamphetamines, they all affect your neurotransmitters the same in one sense. So we have over 100 different neurotransmitters, which are brain chemicals that dictate many different functions. But there's 4 in particular that have anything and everything to do with our mood, and drugs and alcohol, no matter what it is, prescription drugs, street drugs, all of those things affect those 4 mood regulating neurotransmitters. So it's serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and the endorphins. So for instance, if somebody's been abusing methamphetamines, we know that that's going to affect their serotonin levels. It's going to affect their endorphin levels. But it's going to massively impact their dopamine levels, because that's the primary neurotransmitter that methamphetamines function off of. If we were to just talk about alcohol, for instance, alcohol is going to affect those 4, but it's very bio-individual. And all you need to know to find that out is to ask somebody why they drink. So you might ask one person why they drink and they say, oh man, it gives me energy. And the other person would say, oh, it's like pain relief for me. And the other person will say, oh, it helps me wind down after a long day. And so I can easily look at that and see, oh, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, GABA, it's very different. So the framework is the same, because the framework provides the nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that somebody needs to help rebuild those 4 neurotransmitters. So whether somebody has impacted one neurotransmitter over the other is something that we work on and adjust, maybe supplements around, but the eating plan is typically the same, because you need protein, for instance, to manufacture those neurotransmitters. Your neurotransmitters cannot be produced from thin air. Your body cannot make them on their own. The recipe for healthy neurotransmitters is protein. Protein and a digestive system that is working really well, along with some other factors. But those are the 2 things that have to come into alignment, and I would say are foundational for helping somebody, feel better from pause. If somebody is in the midst of pause and they are not looking at their diet or lifestyle whatsoever, their brain and their body are going to fight really hard to come back to that place of balance. And so eventually it's going to happen to some effect. But if you have somebody that is giving their body the nutrition that they need, the very specific vitamins and minerals that help rebuild these neurotransmitters, they're going to be able to reach what we call homeostasis so much faster. So their anxiety, their depression, their insomnia, those things are going to lift dramatically sooner than somebody that's not paying attention to their diet.
I love it. I love it. So much great information. I also love that, even as a counselor, when I'm looking at more of the psychosocial stuff, one of the first things we do is we say, what is it doing for you? How is the drug helping you? Because we need to look at how to soothe those symptoms, or you're going to have to relapse because you're going to have to get those needs met no matter what. And this is the same mentality when you're looking at it, but from a biological standpoint of saying, what is it doing for you? How is it helping you? And probably, you're going to need some more supplements or nutrition to help you feel that same thing. That's awesome. Is there short-term, and so we live in an instant gratification society and everybody wants results right now. Is there a balance between that? Do you think that there's a gradient? Are there certain foods that you say, hey, eat it to change your mood instantly? Or are there things that you say, eat these slower over a long period of time and you'll see results after a while?
Yeah, that's a good question. And sometimes this comes up. And I always think back to this one individual that I had in a group at a treatment center that I worked at. He was coming off of a pretty intense meth addiction, and he was probably in his late 30s, early 40s. And he really took to the information that we were sharing in group. And he was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start eating more protein. I'm going to change this, change that. Literally within 2 weeks, he came back to group, and I'll never forget it because he was like, I literally feel like I'm 15 again. He's like, I feel like a completely different person. So just in a manner of 1 to 2 weeks after changing very basic, simple eating styles, he had a dramatic difference. I mean, he was sitting there falling asleep in class. He was very depressed because, as we know, with methamphetamines, they stimulate such an intense dopamine high that when you remove that, you bottom out, and you become robotic and lifeless and listless. And to see that much of a change in somebody that had come off of a very recent intense meth addiction was just fascinating to me. But that has been my experience with almost every single client that I've worked with. Most people are under consuming protein, especially people in recovery, because it's just not something they're being intentional about or have been told that it's extremely important, because they don't know about the connection between protein and neurotransmitter production. So when they start implementing that, literally within days, they can see a massive difference.
I also recognize that food insecurities and people with low income don't necessarily have hot access to certain proteins, right? Because they're expensive and they eat a lot of carbohydrates and fast foods and Mr. Noodles and those things. And there's very low protein, even if it means, vegetable-based proteins. There's still not a lot of them. I mean, they're eating nutrient deficient stuff and sugars and stuff. So that's awesome. Is there something as being too far gone, as being to a point where somebody needs to take supplements or get injections, where just, changing what they put in their mouth every day in their simple diet is not enough?
Well, I think, what do you mean when you say not enough as a standalone sort of?
Yeah. So what I recognize is, like you were talking about chemical, right? And going back to homeostasis, there's a point where their brain stops developing. The brain's taken so much artificial drugs that the dopamine levels don't regenerate back to normal, and they're considered too far gone to be able to produce them through gratitude and psychosocial interventions and whatever like that. So is there a point where that's the too far gone part? And then also, one of the objections that you get as a counselor talking with people is, that won't work for me, I'm too far gone, and this is too much for me, and that won't work. There's always an objection that you need to overcome. So how do you overcome those objections would be the second part of that question.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I feel like a lot of people will be quick to say something like that. I'm too far gone. And I hate to say it, but there are going to be individuals who have, the severity and the length of their drug use was probably very detrimental to the structure and functioning of their brain. And so sometimes that is possible. And I wouldn't look at it and say they're too far gone in that it's a lost cause, but I would say that the their potential for improvement is going to be just less than somebody else, right? So that does happen. But I see in most cases when somebody is saying that they think that they're not even close to too far gone, like they, I've had, young men in their mid-20s say that, and they have such a potential to change their brain chemistry, and your body reacts to everything that you do. So when you're in active use and those receptors in your brain start to shut down because of the flooding of the neurotransmitters, it takes a little while, but they start to come back up. And we know this because we've seen the brain scans. We have lots of brain scans of individuals who are in active use versus in active recovery, and you can see the receptors of the dopamine, where they're located, when they're sleeping, when they're awake, when they're being produced. And so and with some very intense addictions as well. So I think NIDA's got some, on somebody that shows 14 months in recovery. And so I think it's pretty rare. And let me add to that. If somebody feels and maybe is at that stage where they're not going to be able to see a ton of improvement, I can guarantee you that if they continue to eat the way that they do, they're going to go downhill a lot faster. And so for some people, it might just be more stabilizing and sort of seeing, great improvements. But I still think for most people, improvement is always an option.
What I heard through all that was it'll never hurt.
Yeah, pretty much. It really couldn't.
It'll never hurt, right?
Yeah,
if you're eating healthy and you're finding the right things, it'll never hurt. You'll never go backwards, right?
Exactly.
And forward is forward. Right? That's awesome information. Is there one very common mistake that people make? They go, I'm in recovery and this is what I'm going to dump in my body. This is what I think is right. This is what I should be doing, but they're usually doing it wrong. Is there one of those things that people do in recovery?
There's so many. So protein bars and smoothies. So I feel there's nothing wrong. Like a protein bar and a smoothie, those are neutral tools, right? There's nothing wrong with them. But a lot of people, like I said, they'll start Googling things and they'll think like protein shakes, protein bars, or juice cleanses. That's a big one. I get a lot of people that come to me and want to know about keto, low carb diets, and fasting. Keto, low carb diets, and fasting are the right therapeutic tool for the right person. For individuals in recovery, especially those first 2 years, they're not. And there's very specific biochemical reasons for that. And I'll just give you the example of going low carb, and then keto being an extreme example of low carb. One of the things you want to make sure you're doing in recovery is that you're making a pathway for serotonin to get into your brain. And when you massively restrict carbohydrates are the bus that serotonin rides on to cross the blood-brain barrier. So if you are eating a highly restrictive carbohydrate diet, you don't have the transport system to get serotonin from your gut into the brain, or from the brainstem into the brain, because that's how it works. The carbohydrates actually open up the blood-brain barrier to let serotonin in. And so those are the most common ones. And things like fasting and stuff like that, sometimes it's a religious practice, and, and that's okay, of course. But specifically, if somebody's just like, I'm in recovery and I heard that fasting would be good for me because it's got these amount of benefits, there's so much groundwork that you have to lay in order to be successful at fasting. And one of the major pieces of that is blood sugar balance. And blood sugar balance, learning how to manage your blood sugar, is one of the key pieces of the framework of the pause protocol, because blood sugar that is mismanaged is one of the key relapse triggers.
I believe it. I believe it. That's fantastic information. We're running down on time right now, and this has all been so great. I could ask a million questions. Are you okay with answering a couple of questions from people that are watching?
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I keep looking over here. The reason being is I have a separate screen set up so I can see the chat for Facebook. Okay. There's a couple of questions in here now, but someone just asked who you are. This woman is very, very well versed, and who is she? This is Kelly, everybody. We'll give you more information on her at the end. Shell had brought up what I had brought up earlier, and she's asking about, are there alternatives for people with food insecurities for protein, because protein is expensive? What are the best alternatives to people with food insecurities for that?
Yeah. So the first place I always go to is eggs. So here in the States, if you were to go to any store, I would say, you know, you could typically find a carton of eggs for somewhere between $1.49, $1.79. I don't know what the prices are like in Canada. Obviously, there's a lot of ranks. You could get a lot more expensive eggs that are higher quality, but at the bottom of the barrel, 12 eggs is typically going to be about $1.50. And eggs, because of the makeup of the egg, because it's almost exactly 50% fat and protein, which are both crucial for people in recovery. The fat really helps to repair the structure and function of the brain and to help balance blood sugar. And we've already talked about protein. And the way that for most people, if you don't have an egg sensitivity, the way that our bodies take those nutrients in from an egg has a very, very high bioavailability score, which means that if you eat an egg, your body is going to be able to use 100% of the nutrients in an egg. And there's massive nutrition in that yolk that is so, so valuable. And so that's one of the first places that I say, if you can afford eggs, that would be the best protein that you can get. It's relatively inexpensive. It's highly bioavailable. It's incredibly versatile. There's 15 different ways to eat an egg and to doctor it up. So that's the first place I would go. You could do things like rice and beans and stuff like that. Really, any kind of protein source that you can find is going to be beneficial to an extent. So it's, we're going to kind of move up the ranks of quality the more that you can afford. But at the very least, eggs, rice and beans might be a good fit for some people, or even just the beans. Making a rice and beans, combination gives you access to all 9 of the essential amino acids. So typically it's not what I would recommend, but it will get you some of the protein that you need. Peanut butter. Again, I don't look at peanut butter and think that it's a high quality protein, but at the bottom of the rank, if it's all you can access to, that's a great source of protein as well.
So nuts would fall into that as well, then I would assume. If peanut butter is good, then just having nuts and that sort of stuff.
Nuts, I feel like nuts can be pretty pricey. They are here, but if you have access to them and you can afford them, then yes, nuts is a great choice.
Agreed. They can be. If there's anybody else that has any questions, you can feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll answer them right away at the end. So we'll go through some of this. Kelly is the Addiction Nutritionist. So you can find her at theaddictionnutritionist.com. She's also on Facebook, and she's also on Instagram, where I found her. Very excited and happy that she can share this. When we're done, actually it's on theaddictionnutritionist.com that you can find the post-acute withdrawal protocol, the free worksheet. Is that just an easy click? Do they have to have any navigation to find that, or no?
You just go to the website and click the free downloads tab, and then it'll ask you to put your email in, and it'll give you access.
There you go, just like that. I'm also going to link it up. I'm going to get a recording of this video and put it on my website and link that to Kelly's website with the free information. And it looks like that's it for questions. What is, last one from me to you, what is, if you could only give the person one suggestion, one tip, right? They said, look, I'm struggling, I'm in post-acute withdrawal, my mental health is off. What's the one thing? Not 2, not 3, just one thing that you have to give a tip. What would it be?
It's going to be kind of redundant, but it's protein.
Okay.
There's a lot of other pieces, but that's the one we can't skip over. It's the absolute foundation. And so that is my number one go-to every single time.
Okay.
And I'll add to that the best quality protein that you can afford.
Yeah. Okay. And that's not always easy for some people, it's even not. Right? And then we see the inflation and the prices and the costs. And I don't know, in Ontario, I think they're a little more expensive than probably in Denver. But anyways, was there anything else that you would like to add, closing remarks or something, or any suggestions that you can give to our viewing audience when it comes to their future? So before you answer that, Kelly and I had spoken previously to this about potentially having a workshop in the future with where this would be more of an interactive, where everybody can talk and share in a webinar type series where you could learn more about this and do it more interactively. If this is something that you're interested in, then please contact me, email me, text me, throw it in the chat, do something to signify that that might be of interest to you. And then I'm already interested. I think it's something that I want to do even for myself, and I don't care if any of you come. I'm kidding. but I want to learn more information. I think it's important for my career. So from a professional standpoint, there's two different ways that we could do something with Kelly. Is if you're a professional in the field and you wanted to learn about how to introduce these things to other people, or if you're in recovery and you think you would like to sit on and learning how to change your diet yourself, which I would benefit from both. But if you're interested, throw it in the chat, let me know. Okay. Oh, we got another question here if you're okay with it.
Yeah.
Are there any certain vitamins or nutrients that help one with memory? My partner stated that his memory seems to be worse during his recovery. So he's having memory problems. I usually ask people about their sleep patterns when they're talking about memory problems, but what about nutrition?
Yeah, you know, there is a supplement called ginkgo biloba, and Dr. Daniel Amen, if you're familiar with him, you could easily Google him. If you Google Dr. Daniel Amen in memory or Dr. Daniel Amen in ginkgo biloba, he's got some studies on it, and it has been shown to improve people's memory. There's also another side to that supplement that's not ideal, and so it might not be the right fit for everybody. The smell of rosemary, as holistic as that might sound, has actually been proven to have a massive effect on people's memory. So getting something like an essential oil of rosemary, or if you have fresh rosemary sprigs, and getting into the habit of smelling that every day can be phenomenal. We know that stress incinerates the cells of the hippocampus, which is the memory center of the brain. So getting your stress under control and learning stress management is one of the best ways to further that damage. Sleep, absolutely, because when we sleep, our body goes into that repair and rebuild mode. And if you've ever had to go to college or study for something, it's very common knowledge that you learn something and it stays in your short-term memory until you sleep. And that's when the drive gets like transferred from short-term to long-term memory. So sleep is absolutely crucial as well. But I would say looking into ginkgo biloba and absolutely rosemary for sure.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or any words of wisdom you'd like to provide for everybody watching today?
Sure. I'll just say that I offer free consultations. So if you always feel free to send additional questions to my email, but if you want to sign up for a consultation, you could do that through the website as well. Basically, during that session, I just get to know a little bit more about your goals and can give you more information about how the program works to see if it's a good fit. I also specialize in ADHD as well as addiction recovery. And I have another website for that. It's warriorwellness.group. And so you could easily access that as well. But if this is something that you're interested in learning more about the pause protocol, either for yourself or if you're a practitioner, it really is the missing link. I truly believe, in the treatment industry. And I'll give you a book recommendation. The Mood Cure by Julia Ross is a fantastic resource for learning more about this. So if you want to learn more about the amino acid therapy or some of the diet, nutrition, vitamin and mineral pieces, I would pick up that book.
I will put a link to that book on my website as well, with the nutrition on there, to link people to that and all the information that you've shared. Thank you, Kelly. This has been awesome. I really appreciate that. It's so enlightening, and I love learning new things and being able to share that information with the general public. And there's obviously some layers I'm going to have to peel back on my own diet and my own nutrition. I have to look at a little more in depth. So thank you very much. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much. This has been great. Great fun.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.